Okay, let's go ahead and get started with live stream number 3 for Reason Prep. And so today we're going to go over any questions you might have in SAT, in ACT, in SAT subject tests, AP chemistry, math, whatever you've got, we can, or just regular chemistry, we can take a look at any of those questions. So just some instructions in terms of how to send questions. So to send questions, send email to ask@reasonprep.com. That's usually the best way to get your questions answered. You can ask questions in chat, but I do prioritize questions that were emailed. So ask@reasonprep.com. If you're going to ask about a specific SAT or ACT question, I do request that you include the answer to the question. That just streamlines the process. I don't have to go looking up the answer to make sure I did it right. Send an image for the problem if possible, and the source of the question if possible. So did it come from a real test? Did it come from a Barron's book? Whatever it might be. You can also send general questions, so about the SAT, the ACT, or whatever. They don't have to be about a particular problem, but I do ask that you try to be as specific as you can with your questions. So a question like, how do I get a 1600? really hard to answer with any effectiveness, because that's, whole courses are created about that subject. If, on the other hand, it's something like on ACT English, the questions where I have to change the opening word of the sentence, do you have any tips on those? That's a bit more focused, so I can give a better answer. Really, it's just for me to be able to give good answers to questions. And if they're really broad, it's hard for me to do that without sitting here and just rambling for who knows how long. Those are basically the rules. Okay, some questions. Let me see what I've got. How many questions? I don't think I should have many email questions so far. So let's just go right to the chat. Hi, Arpan. Sorry, how I would pronounce your name. Question: by when is the SAT Math Gauntlet coming? So, about gauntlets. So there's an ACT Math Gauntlet. Let me give a little context here. There's an ACT Math Gauntlet. I'm going to put it up here. And so it's basically a packet of questions that are geared to helping you understand what topics you need to review or not review on ACT Math. And so a lot of practice questions. There's an answer key. If you want video solutions and instruction on all the topics, you can check out my ACT Math Bootcamp course. So this is the ACT Math Gauntlet, and I do intend on doing an SAT Math Gauntlet, but probably not soon. Certainly not before the May test. So to put this in text, and let me actually switch back to this. So to put it into text, oh, I messed it up. So SAT Math Gauntlet, not before the May test, unfortunately. I'm working on a number of other things right now, one of which is going to be actually on the homepage of the site. I'm going to have a listing of what I'm working on, so you can see what is coming that's new and what I've just finished, among other things. So not before the May test. The real question is before the June test. That is probably also going to be difficult, because the major projects that I'm working on next are crash courses for the SAT and ACT. So if you have a week into the test, or if you just want a quick summary of the SAT or the ACT, that's what these crash courses are going to be about. So certainly sometime in the summer, I think, is a pretty good bet. But I've got so many other things going on first that probably not before that. If you want like practice math problems, for now at least, that's part of my math course. I have basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the problems that I use in my math course and put them into a packet, kind of similar to what I did with the ACT Math Bootcamp. So if you're a member of my site, if you got access to the math course, those questions would be a place to start for now at least. I intend on creating a number of resources, worksheets, and stuff for SAT and ACT, but I'm a one-man crew here, so I've got a lot of things I need to do, and it just takes me a while to get through each one. Am I still live, or my internet connection is slow? Yeah, I from what I can tell, I'm still live. It looks like other people are saying that I'm live, so I think we're good. It's probably something with your internet connection, is my guess. How long are the crash courses going to be? So, don't know yet, but the intention behind the crash courses when they're done, and I'm hoping to have them done, or at least the SAT one done before the June test. That would be the goal. And if I'm really productive, get them both done before the June test, both the SAT and the ACT crash course. So the whole point of the crash courses is they're going to be basically the fastest way to prep possible. That's my goal. My goal is to, because the number one thing when I'm working with students is students just don't have enough time. Don't have enough time to do the prep that they need to do. So my goal was to make a resource that kind of condenses the most important things you need to know for both the SAT and the ACT into the smallest package of courses and videos and exercises possible. So it's still in planning phases. I don't know exactly how long it's going to be, but the goal is to keep it as concise as possible, because I think that will be most helpful. Now, you're going to sacrifice a little bit of the comprehensiveness, of course. We're not going to be able to cover every single topic because it's going to be a crash course. It's going to be condensed. So my full courses will be in place if you've got a longer term schedule. But the goal of the crash courses is to make something more concise. So I'm hoping like keeping it in single digits in terms of hours of video is probably a realistic goal. Question about letters for, I guess, college admissions essays, I'm guessing. That's what my assumption is is what the question is. So college admissions essays, I do look at college admissions essays, but I can't do that for everybody, and I can't do it for free because it requires a lot of time. I got to read the essay, I got to think about it, write comments, write commentary, so I can't do it for free, but I do have a service which you might be able to use if you're interested to get your essays read and get comments on college admissions essays, among other things. So I'm going to put this up on the screen as well. Put this up here. So it's actually one of the things I'm working on now. I'm coming up with this extra help program. Basically, you can, instead of going through a longer term tutoring process where we would be meeting weekly or twice a week or whatever it might be, it'd be more intensive course. I'm offering a way for you just to purchase time that you can use to meet about whatever on whatever schedule you're on demand. So if, for example, you wanted help with essays, you could book some time with me. We can just talk about essays, and there would be no commitment beyond that session. So it's just a convenient and easy way to schedule time on your schedule, on demand for you, and to go over SAT, ACT problems, whatever it might be, but it would be a one-on-one tutoring type deal. And because it's more of an informal session, because it's not going to require us to go through, it doesn't require me to do a lot of planning because we're just meeting to discuss. My rate for extra help is a lot lower than it is for tutoring. So if you're interested in that, just go to my website, look up extra help, and you can find more information on that. But I do look at college admissions essays. It's just not something I do free. Let me just check my emailed questions here. Okay, so I got emailed questions. All right, in the SAT, how do I resolve conflicts between multiple choices that seem correct? So I would ask you to narrow this a little bit more because there's different answers to this question for different question types, for different sections. So if you could pick one section in particular, that would be useful. So if you want to either put it in chat, if you're watching, I assume you are, or email me back, either one is fine. How should I improve my understanding of complex passages in the SAT? Okay, so never mind. I'm going to come back to that. So reading. So it was followed up with reading. So this is probably one of the most asked questions about reading. It's when you're stuck between two choices. Particularly two, sometimes three, but almost always it's two. What do you do when you're stuck between two choices? Now, a lot of what I could say depends on the question, depends on the passage, but there's one piece of advice I can give you that can really help for when you're stuck between two. And I talk about this a lot in my videos. I think I even have a video or two on this on YouTube if you want to check it out. I believe it's even called What to Do When You're Stuck Between Two Choices, something like that. But when you're stuck between two choices in the reading, what you need to do is check every word. Each word counts. So what do I mean by this? Sometimes, let's come up with a scenario. Let me get my tablet out here. So let's say get my wires organized here. So let's say you're doing a reading section, and let's say you've got 4 choices, A, B, C, D. And let's say you've eliminated B and C because they are ridiculous, but you're stuck between 2, and they seem really similar. They seem both like they could be correct. What do you do? Well, what you need to do is check every word of those choices, because usually, like let's say this one is like blah, 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 and this one says blah, 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 blah. Usually what it comes down to, especially on these hard questions, is there's perhaps even one word in one of the choices that doesn't fit the passage. Literally one word. So what you could see, for example, is when you're checking the choices, it may be, let's say, this word right here in choice D that doesn't actually fit. Maybe it's too extreme. Maybe it's not mentioned in the passage. Maybe it's too much of an inference. So it could be one word in one of the choices that would help you, boom, eliminate D and pick A. So what you need to do is really drill into that choice and say, does every word work here? Particularly these words that are wrong often come towards the end of the choice, because what they want you to do is read the beginning part. The beginning part will look good, and you'll say, oh, okay, this looks good, I'll pick it, without kind of really giving the full attention to the whole choice and maybe seeing that that last word doesn't work. So without a more specific example, this is about as specific as I can get, but this is really what it comes down to. What makes a reading question hard when it comes down to picking the final choice is you're going to get 2 choices that are very similar, and why they seem similar, or why they both seem correct, is because most of the choices are correct. So this whole choice would be correct. All of this would be correct. It's just that one little thing that's wrong, and that's what makes the whole choice wrong. So this is a trap choice that I call in my courses half right, all wrong, which I stole from Princeton Review. But the idea is basically that even one piece of a choice, if it's wrong, makes the whole thing wrong, and then you have to go with the other one. Okay, so let's move on to another one. Go back to this one. So what should you do to improve your understanding of complex passages on the SAT? So I'm guessing in particular what you mean by this obviously depends on the passage, but often the one that gives students the most trouble is the history passage. There's always going to be one passage that is more historically based. So, something from the 1800s or something like that. And so again, it's hard without really going through a passage together, but a lot of what it comes down to for the history passage in particular is really leaning hard on the questions to find out actually what do you need to understand and what do you not need to understand. Because for a lot of that passage, there's going to be stuff in the passage that they're not going to ask questions about. Even if it's a general question, you don't necessarily need to understand it. So spending time trying to comprehend a part of the passage that they're going to ask no questions about is a waste of time, and it's a waste of energy. So it's going to be really leaning hard on the questions as a guide for you to understand, okay, what do I actually need to pay attention to? What is actually going to be important or not? And I talk a lot about this in my YouTube videos. I have a video on this. I think it's about, the video is how not to zone out or how to ace boring passages, something like that. I've got a number of videos on this. So check the SAT reading playlist on my channel, and you'll see more information about this. I also work through like an actual history passage line by line, so you can see how we can analyze it. Part of it's practice, but a lot of it is just really leaning on the questions. What's going to be important, what's not. Can I get it done by the end of the month, especially, I guess specifically the SAT crash course? Probably not, I'm afraid. I mean, it's 7 days, it's a week. There's definitely no way I'll be able to get the crash course done by the end of the month, unfortunately. Like I said, hopefully by the end of June or by the end of May would be the goal. Is transfer application risky? If you're watching still, what do you mean by risky? I guess would be my question. Is it competitive? Yeah, I mean, it depends on, I mean, maybe if that's what you mean. Yeah, it's competitive depending on where you're transferring from, where you're going. But if you meant something else by risky, let me know. Uh, Another question, more strategies to eliminate incorrect choices. This was an emailed question. I assume you also mean in reading, and you already mentioned the trap videos. So yeah, I've got videos on trap answers, both on YouTube and in my courses. So you've already watched it, the question asker, but other people, if you've not seen my videos on trap answers, that would be a place to start. Again, it's hard to really talk generally because in the end, what it's going to come down to is what does the passage say? Which choice matches what the passage says? That's it. A lot of people overcomplicate reading way too much. I don't know where exactly that comes from. I mean, I have some speculation. So, for example, a lot of the stuff you might do in English class may seem somewhat opaque in terms of themes and symbols and figurative language, and sometimes it can seem a little wishy-washy. And a lot of times we bring that mindset to SAT passages, but that's not the case at all. The answer is in the passage. If you're having problems answering a question or eliminating choices, the problem probably is you haven't found where in the passage the evidence is. That's what it comes down to. So that's what I can say generally without looking at more specific examples. This is new to me. Wait a minute. So, okay, good. I was going to say. Ooh, wait. Okay, good. I thought. Wait, what? Okay, I thought I lost the. Okay. I thought I lost the chat for a little bit. Okay, so let me catch up here. Um, Hello from Hong Kong. Hello. Which services? So I guess the question was about what I offer for my extra help services. So again, that's where you can meet with me for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever it is. Very informal. It's not a long-term tutoring relationship, and therefore the rates are a little bit lower. So what kind of things could we talk about? We can go over SAT and ACT problems that you want to discuss that you're having trouble with. We can talk about that. We can go through strategies that are more specific to your situation, whether it's reading, math. We can go through other school stuff. You maybe help with homework, help studying for a test. I do math and I do chemistry. We can talk about your essays for school, your projects. We can talk about college admissions. We can talk about college essays. Really anything that you might work with me in tutoring, we could do in a more informal way in these extra help sessions. So if you go to Reason Prep and you look up extra help, you'll find it. Well, you'll find it soon. It's still being linked together, but it'll be there. If you check YouTube, I made a video on it recently. Let's see. Okay, next question is, do you have some kind of notes or written material for the writing course? I feel it'd be nice to have something on paper for review. I agree, and the answer is no. Again, one-man crew, so a one-man crew who tutors and designs the courses and films the videos and does all this stuff. So like I'm trying my best to like do as much as I can, but unfortunately the written kind of workbooks and reference sheets that would be very, very helpful for my courses, including writing, is not something that I've had a chance to do yet. It is on my to-do list, but there's like 50 things on my to-do list. So not yet. I would agree it would be useful to have a written paper. It's just hard with everything that I've got to do, but it is on my to-do list. Okay, got an emailed question. How do I beat the really opaque historical passages and speeches with kind of weird jargon? Unfortunately, there's no shortcut. This is the issue with the history passages, to return back to history. There is no shortcut. Like, there's no one thing I can tell you that suddenly you'll be able to read something from the 18th century. It just doesn't happen. What it comes down to is, as I said before, really leaning on the questions, practicing reading this stuff more. That's about it, unfortunately. What it might come down to if you're having a lot of trouble with it, especially for those of you out there who are non-native speakers. I mean, I'll put it this way. Native speakers of English have problems with this because when you're looking at language, English from 18th century, as you're saying, the kind of weird word usage that we're not used to. Even native speakers don't even know what's happening half the time. So you can imagine if you're English as a second language person, then this would be even harder. And unfortunately, there is no like, oh, here, if you know this, suddenly you understand it. Doesn't exist. So really, what you're going to perhaps have to do if you're really struggling with history is triage it. Really make sure you can maximize your score on the other 4 passages of the reading section, and then do your best with the history according to the things that I've already mentioned already. But in the end, it comes down to specific passages, so it's hard to be more specific than that. Okay. Can you? So test 8, I actually haven't looked at it yet for questions that were 33 and 34. So because I haven't looked at it, I actually don't even have the test. I just finished doing videos for tests 5, 6, and 7. And then they just came out with 8. So again, that's going to be something I'm going to do later. I'm not going to be able to do that question or either of those questions yet because I haven't looked or read through the passages or done it yet. But eventually I will hopefully be able to. So I apologize for that. Okay, next question. I heard that while doing transfer application, there are chances of losing the current college when we are unable to achieve our target college. I do mean like you're trying to transfer while you are still applying to other schools. I don't know what the context is. I know like you're not going to get kicked out of your current college for trying to transfer. That's not going to happen. I don't know when you would try to transfer while you're still applying to other places. I don't know. That doesn't sound like something I would be worried about, but maybe if you could be more specific, I or others might know what you're referring to. Next, whoa. Okay. Next question. What would you suggest I do if I want to get a perfect score on the critical reading section of the May test? If I currently get about 2 mistakes per passage. All right. This is the really tough question. So let me put this on the screen. So it's about like improving to the next level, basically. So this person basically gets about 2 wrong per passage. And here's the thing. Even the best SAT critical reading student or tutor is not always going to get everything right every single time. So even like me, for example, most of the time I take the reading section, I'm doing it like barely paying attention. I do it pretty quickly. Usually we'll get them right, but sometimes I'll make a mistake. Even if I'm actually, in the testing environment trying, I'm not immune to making mistakes. So the first lesson is what we have to think about in terms of scores and perfection, getting to that top level, is that there's actually a range of possibilities for you. Everyone actually doesn't have, like, let's say right now you're at 760, let's just say, for reading, writing. On any given day, you're not going to score a 760. Some days, by luck, you might score a 730, or other days you might get luckier than that and get a 790. And that's why they actually report your score as a range. So the fact that you're getting 2 wrong, it's probably not consistent. Maybe sometimes you get 2 wrong, maybe sometimes 4 wrong, sometimes 3, sometimes 1, sometimes none. So the goal is going to be, what can we do to move that band of wrong questions closer to perfection? What can we do to maximize our chances of getting a 1600 or getting an 800 reading in this case? There's a few things. Again, it depends on your specific situation, depends on there's question types, but here's some general points. One is check all answers thoroughly, especially circled questions. So what do I mean by this? Obviously, you want to have time to check your answers. So if you are finishing the test in like 63 minutes and you've got only 2 minutes left to check and you're getting 2 wrong, one of the things to work on is to become more efficient so that you could finish the test in, let's say, 55 minutes and have 10 minutes to check your answers. That's the first step. You're going to need extra time to review your work. So if you don't have that extra time, you're going to want to work on becoming more efficient so that you've got that extra time. Once you begin to check your answers, you want to focus on questions that you've circled. And so this is where the skill of test taking comes in a little bit. So when I'm working through a test section and there's a question that as I'm doing it, I'm like, ooh, this one seems a little tricky. Like I'm stuck between two and I'm trying to balance the choices. What you want to do is circle that number. Even if you come up with an answer, circle that number so that when you come back at the end, after you've finished everything else, you've got a set of questions that you know were tricky. And now you can go back and review the question, come at it with a fresh eye, see if you noticed something you didn't the first time, give it more time to think about it. And you want to really identify those questions because most likely if you're going to get one wrong, it's going to be one of those, right? A lot of times when we get questions wrong, we're not really surprised we get it wrong. It's kind of like, oh yeah, I had problems with this one. So you want to be able to identify those in the test so that you can come back later after you've finished it and you've got time left to check those first. And then once you've done that, you've checked all your circles, then you go back and check whatever else you can. But it's about identifying what are my tricky questions, which are the ones that gave me trouble. Let me get an answer if I can, but then come back later to review. That's really important. Knowing what your danger questions are so that you can give them more time once you finished everything else. Let's see. What else could we say here? A lot of it gets into strategy in terms of trap answers, for example. Know very clearly which answers are typically trap choices. And I go through a lot of this in my reading course. Things like half right, all wrong, which I talked about previously. Extreme answer choices, true but wrong. So, for example, if a choice is true in real life or from your knowledge, doesn't mean it's right. It's got to fit the passage. Watch out for questions that use specific words from the passage. Sometimes that can be a sign that it's wrong. Not always, but sometimes. So knowing the trap answers can help you avoid some of the more obvious or sometimes sneaky mistakes. So that would be another thing. Is there anything? I mean, there's a lot more in terms of strategy. I would say let's leave it at this for now because it really comes down to, as well, I guess, kind of identifying weaknesses would be the last thing. Which question types, if any, are you consistently getting wrong? Are there ways to improve on those question types? Are there passages that are giving you trouble? Are there ways to improve on those passages? That's what I would say in terms of more perfect scores. Okay. Anyways, other than just repetition of the questions that I can do to keep from burning out during the ACT, I usually crash during the reading. Yeah, so I talk about this a lot in videos. I think on YouTube I've talked about this before. And a lot of times when we're talking about time management, we focus a lot on I'm running out of time. I need more time to finish the section. That kind of thing, very standard. But we often give less attention to the fact that these tests are really long, they're really draining mentally, and what can I do to deal with that? Like once I master time and I don't have issues running out of time, what do I do with the fact that this test is really, really long and tiring? And a lot of advice that can be given here. The one thing I would say, besides, of course, practice, I mean, you know that, right? Do practice tests, full tests, do it under tiny conditions. When you're practicing, try to keep the distractions away because you got to build that focus muscle. I would say, again, this is just maybe more, I don't know, me turning into a cranky old person, but I don't envy you all for having to grow up and learn in school in the technology, social media, internet environment that you do. So I went to school in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when I was in high school. And, we had AOL, but none of this stuff existed, right? There was some internet, it was like barely a thing. So it was very easy to kind of focus and get, not easy, but easier in some ways to focus, I think. But now I find it with myself, with all the tech and gadgets and devices and social media, it's really hard to get that focus muscle strengthened. So you have to, in your practice, really put away the phones, put away the social media, turn off the TV, turn off music, and really learn how to focus, because it's something you can get better at if you put in the time. So beyond all that obvious advice, the one thing I would say that also gets less attention is efficiency. And what do I mean by this? So a lot of times we focus on the questions that we get wrong. Obviously, if I get a question wrong in reading, I want to make sure that I don't get it wrong in the future, or that I learn, if I get a question wrong in math, that I learn the math concept. But we also want to pay attention to what you're getting right, because you can get a question right, but you could do it in an inefficient way. You can use up a lot of time. You can use up a lot of mental energy. So the way you increase your efficiency, one of the ways to do that is to get better at the stuff you're already good at. Because put it this way, like let's say there's a math problem that you get right, but you get it right after about a minute and a half of like thinking. There's all these calculations, you got to pull out the calculator, do all this work, and then you get the answer. You get it right, but it took you a minute and a half, and more importantly, it took you a lot of brain power. Versus eventually you learn, oh, I can do the same question with this shortcut, do it in 15 seconds, and I save time and I save energy. So sure, you're still getting the same question right. It's not a difference in the score, but it makes a big difference longer term. So when you're reviewing your work, your practice sections, your tests, you also want to focus on the questions you get right and say, are there ways I can do this better, faster, easier, more efficiently? And that can help with burnout, in addition to practicing and all that good stuff. Okay, let's see. Is there any trick to tackle questions of the history passage? Again, about SAT reading. This is very popular because the history passage is always the trickiest. Unfortunately, again, like I was saying before, not really. No trick beyond what you would do on any other reading questions. I mean, it all still applies. Make sure you're sticking to the passage, find the clue in the passage that answers the question. Make sure you're not falling into any traps. Evaluate all 4 choices. Eliminate the ones that are wrong as you look for the one that's right. I mean, there's not much of a trick specifically for history, I don't think. How to efficiently write the SAT essay. So I go through a lot of SAT essay stuff in my course, which is free on YouTube. So if you haven't checked it out already, do that. And it goes through everything you need to know for the essay. But I will say the main thing I can say for the SAT essay is know what the template of your essay is going to be. And I have a handout for this. Actually, let me pull it out so I don't have to type all this. So you can download this in my essay course. So if you're not a member, if you don't have access to it already, you should be able to get access to the course. It's on my website. It's available for free. So in this course, you'll get this cheat sheet, and this cheat sheet will lay out exactly the template that I think works for a really strong essay. It tells you how to write, how long to write, how long to plan and research, read the essay that you're writing an essay on, how long to write, what each paragraph should look like, what you should include in each paragraph, some additional tips. So I would say this document, it's the cheat sheet. It's part of the essay course, available for free in the essay course on my website. That would be the thing that would probably best answer your question. Okay, how do I avoid making 1 or 2 silly mistakes on the SAT math section? This is actually really similar to what we just talked about for reading. So the first question was about what to do when I get 2 wrong in reading, and we had some points to make there. This one's about math. So a lot of things we talked about with reading apply here in terms of checking your answers, circling questions that give you trouble, being more efficient, all that good stuff. It really comes down to specific questions for math in particular in terms of avoiding mistakes. Other things that I would add, though, just as a general tip, would be, if you have the time, try different methods. So if I'm working on a tough problem and I want to make sure I did my answer right, if I know of another way to try the problem, I'll try it that way. And if I get the same answer doing it 2 different ways, 99.9% of the time I've done it right. Another thing to do would be plug in your answer. So once you get an answer, test it. This is obvious when you solve for x, plug it into the equation, see if it works, but it can work in other cases. So plug in your answer as into the problem and see if it's consistent. And if it is, again, 99.9% of the time, you probably did it right. Another thing would be to, I had it in my head and now it's gone. What's reasonable and what's not, or estimation. This really helps a lot on percent questions. So, for example, if you're trying to get the percent of a number and you end up with a number that's bigger than the original, that doesn't make sense, because a percent, if it's like 15%, should be smaller, should get you a number that's smaller than the original. So knowing what answers should be reasonable, estimating around what the answer should be based on the numbers in the problem. If you get something wildly different from what you expect, that's perhaps a sign that you made a mistake. So that would be 3 things I would say. Again, the same thing applies with the reading, where there's always natural variance. Luck will come into play. Some days you'll get 4 wrong. Some days you'll get 3 wrong. Sometimes you'll get none wrong. Sometimes you'll get 1 wrong and then 2 wrong. And so there's a lot of variance just based on luck and the difficulty of the test and things like that. So all you can do is get good habits to try to shift what's normal for you. The normal range, shift it closer and closer to perfection. Okay, let's see. We've got some more chat questions. I took my ACT on the 19th. Should I start prepping for the June 10 ACT already? Absolutely. So the earlier you start prepping, obviously, the better. Mostly because it allows you to not have to cram like a crazy person. You can study for a half hour, an hour a day, be consistent, rather than if you wait until the beginning of June to study, then you got to cram in. That doesn't make sense. So definitely get started, even if you don't have your scores back for the ACT that you've just taken. You'll get them back pretty quickly. And you probably already know what you need to work on to some extent. So definitely get started. The earlier you start, not only will you do better and you'll get more out of your practice sessions, but the less unpleasant studying will be. Because I find, this is just my opinion, cramming to be unbelievably unpleasant. And it's not as good as studying consistently over a longer period of time. So absolutely, if your test is coming up in June, study right now. Start. I seem to struggle with the science passages on the SAT. Any advice? So, on the SAT, we know there's a history passage. We know there's a fiction passage. There's usually a passage about technology, usually like internet stuff. And then there's like a sociology-ish passage. And then there's a science passage, which is going to be about biology or the environment or physics or whatever. And so this person says they struggle with the science passages on the SAT. Any particular advice on them? So the one thing I would say is don't get hung up as much as you can on the jargon. So even though it is a science passage, science knowledge, what you know about science, shouldn't matter at all. You should be able to answer all the questions based, again, what's in the passage, what's in the text. So don't get too hung up on jargon as best you can. I know sometimes it can be confusing, but don't think you need to understand those words based on what you've learned in your science classes. It's not necessarily relevant. What's going to matter is what's in the text. Second thing would be, the good thing about a lot of these science passages is they often have a lot more line reference questions and keyword questions. So these are those specific questions that you'll find in passage questions. And that's a good thing, because that means you can rely a lot more on really analyzing the particular parts of passages that they're going to ask you about. And that means that getting the main idea right away is not probably necessary. You can work to get the main idea as you work through those specific questions. But really, again, and the same advice stands for any reading passage. Focus on the text, eliminate choices, narrow down to the right answer, watch out for trap answers, really focus on the wording of choices. That makes a difference. Don't reason too far beyond the text, even on an inference question, because it's always based on the passages. Do you recommend using a calculator on SAT math? This may seem like a strange question, but there's actually something interesting about it. It may seem like, yes, obviously you want to use a calculator. And yeah, I mean, you do want to use a calculator, but there's an interesting point here. Do you recommend using a calculator on the SAT math section? I didn't carry a calculator in my first test and got a 760. Nice. It seems almost all the questions can be solved without a calculator. Yes. So as you know, one of the sections you're not allowed to use a calculator, another one you are. My whole stance on this is the lack of a calculator is more psychological than anything else. As this question says, certainly in section 3, all of the questions can be answered without a calculator. Even in section 4, nothing strictly requires a calculator. You might have to do some ugly calculations by hand without it, but you don't need it. Now, of course, yeah, use the calculator in section 4. No problem. However, 2 points are not having the calculator in section 3 isn't actually as much of an issue as you might think it is. It's more of a psychological thing. And having a calculator in section 4 is not really going to save you because the calculator is more of a nice little thing to have. So I think the key here is, yes, use the calculator, but as the question's saying, it's actually maybe not as important as we might think it is. Relying on it is not going to be the solution to doing well in the math section. I already solved every single critical reading passage published by the College Board and Khan Academy. I still get mistakes. Where can I get more practice? So this is where it gets really tricky, and I actually made a video specifically on this. So let me pull up that video. Okay, so what was the title of it? Actually, we'll just do this. So it's one of my somewhat recent-ish Just Pick C videos. And it was about what happens when you run out of tests. So let me mute that. So here. So if you go to YouTube, you'll just Google or go to YouTube and go to my channel or just type in ran out of tests, more practice for the SAT. I talk about what to do when you've run out of tests. That's a really good image to stop on. That's not much better. That's not much better. I kind of look like an idiot. So let's just scroll down. But you get the idea. This is the video that basically covers exactly this topic, what to do when you run out of tests. And if I just maybe seek ahead a little bit to where I talk about this. For reading, it's a lot trickier. But long story short, you're going to use old SAT passages, which you should be able to find a lot of. So because they're somewhat similar and they're a pretty good substitute. I don't recommend third-party books like Princeton Review or Barron's or anything like that for SAT reading. I barely recommend Khan Academy even for SAT reading because it's really hard to get right, to get the questions and the passages right. So I would say old SAT questions. But like I said, if you go to YouTube, type in ran out of tests, reason prep, you'll find this video. There's also a link on my website about this. So that should answer the question. Okay, let's see. Okay, we've got a question about subject tests, specifically SAT chemistry. And this applies to any subject test because there's a little bit of a holdover from the old SAT days. So what should the guessing strategy be for the SAT chemistry subject test? How's it different from the actual SAT? So this applies to any subject test that you're taking. So what I'm going to say applies to Math 2, Math 1, Physics, Bio, History, Literature, anything. Because on the subject tests, if you get a question right, you get +1, which is what you would expect. If you omit the question, so if you leave it blank, you get no credit, which is what you expect. But if you get it wrong, not only do you get no credit for it, they actually take away 1/4 of a point. And this is how it used to be on the old SAT. Of course, this is not true for the full SAT, right? This is on the regular SAT, you can guess, no problems. On the ACT, you can guess, no problems. It's just on the subject tests where this is true. And because this is true, people freak out about it because they don't want to lose that 1/4 point. But here's the thing. Here's ultimately the rule of thumb for any time you've got this guessing penalty. If you can eliminate 2 or more choices, guess. That is the strategy. It's really as simple as that. If you can get rid of at least 2 choices, so if you can get down to, on the SAT subject tests, 3 choices or 2 choices to pick from, guess. And that's it. If you can only eliminate 1 choice, or you can't eliminate any, then you omit. And that's it. Nothing more complicated than that. Don't overthink it. Be aggressive in your guessing, because if you can eliminate 2 or 3 choices, you want to guess. So do it. And then if you can't, you can only eliminate 1 or none, leave it blank. And this only applies to the SAT subject test, just to reiterate. This is not for the real SAT. The real SAT, there is no guessing penalty. Fire away. Okay. $11.50 to $12.50 in 2 weeks. Pretty hard to do. Not impossible. 100 points in 2 weeks. A lot of it depends on what you've done already to prep. And if you haven't done much, then you might have some lower hanging fruit to get. It depends on what the breakdown of that 1150 is. So, for example, if you've got a lot of room to run in writing is something you could actually improve on pretty quickly. So it depends on the breakdown. It depends on what you've done already. It depends on the resources you have. But it's not impossible. It'd be hard, 100 points in 2 weeks, but especially at that score range and with the possibilities of low-hanging fruit that you could make some quick gains on, I think it would be possible. Okay, another question about score gains. Is it easy to move from 1220 to 1500 in 6 months? How much time should I invest every day? So I wouldn't say it's easy, because if it were, then everyone would get 1500s, and then it wouldn't be much of an achievement. So it's not easy, but is it doable? Generally speaking, yeah. 6 months is enough time to make a big jump. Again, like I was saying to the last person, a lot of it depends on what you've done already. A lot of it depends on the classes you've taken, things like that. But in principle, it is possible. In terms of how much time to invest every day, so I go through this a lot in my study plan course, which is available for free on Reason Prep. So go ahead and check out my study plan course. And what I recommend there, since you're starting 6 months ahead, is that on average, 30 minutes per day, 4 to 5 days per week, over 6 months would be really solid. Now, of course, sometimes you might go a little bit longer than 30 minutes. Like if you're doing a practice section, you check the answers, whatever it might be. Other times you might do a full practice tests, and I recommend full practice tests once every, given 6 months, like 1 every 3 weeks would probably be fine, or maybe even once every month, given that you're really starting far out. But so sometimes you might go longer than that, but on average, you should try to be consistent. That's the most important thing. It doesn't really so much matter how much you do each day, just as long as you do something each day, even if it's 20 minutes of prep. That is much more important than what most students do, which is do nothing through the week and then maybe cram on a Sunday or cram on a Saturday and a Sunday. You're not going to get as much results out of that compared to splitting that up and just doing a little bit each day. So that's the most important thing. Okay, just as a 10-minute warning, we're going to be finishing at 3 o'clock my time, which is in 10 minutes. So if you want to get in some last questions, I recommend doing that. So let's keep going. 10-minute warning. I was wondering how or what to drill to become better on the reading section. So there is a few levels to this, and a lot of it depends on how much time you have left until the test. So let me split this into long-term and short-term. Long-term meaning like 6 months plus. Short-term meaning like less than 6 months. So for long-term, obviously the first thing to do is read every day. And this would be, I have a reading list, so if you want to get some suggestions for the kinds of things you read, just go to Reason Prep, look up reading list, you'll find where that reading list is. Goes through the magazines, newspapers, websites, books, things that you can read to help you improve your reading. But just like with prepping, if you read every day, even if it's for 15 minutes a day on average, That will make a big difference long term because you're going to gain the skills that you'll need to read. The people who do well on the reading section typically are people who have done a lot of reading on their own through their life. It's a lot harder to get a higher score if you haven't had that baseline of reading. So if you don't, or you don't do it as much as you like, start now. Get started, read every day. Like I said, check out my reading list on Reason Prep. Other thing would be to do some vocab work. Now, this isn't perhaps as useful as it was on the old SAT, and even there, I don't think it was as useful. There, again, if you check my website, reasonprep.com, look up the vocab list. That's available for free. I've got some of the most common words that appear on the SAT, so check that out. And so learn some vocab. Again, over the long term, that can make a big difference. So read every day, read stuff you like, read stuff that challenges you, but that also interests you as best you can, and learn some vocab. Keep working on that consistently, and you'll turn into, like, if you do this for 6 months and you're consistent, 6 months plus, you can turn into a real powerhouse. And like, here's the thing, once you're a good reader, all this stuff about strategy and this and that and tips and tricks, it's just extra. Because if you're a really strong, powerful reader, you'll just cut through the passages like they're butter. And the only way you can do that is by building up the strength and these habits. Now, over the short term, let's say you've got less than 6 months, or you just don't have much time, whatever it might be, what can you do? Obviously, these are the best solutions because that turns into a powerful reader. But the most important thing to do is, of course, practice passages on the SAT/ACT, whatever you're doing. Really, the best way to get better at SAT reading is to do SAT reading. The best way to get better at ACT reading is to do ACT reading. So I would definitely do practice passages, timed especially, timed sections, timed tests. That's the bread and butter. Then you'll want to do a full review of the questions. Every single question, every single choice, really drill in and see, why is this question, what is this question asking? Why is the answer right? Why are the other choices wrong? And then, as an extra bonus, what you should do is a close reading of the passage. So after you've done the test, after you've done the questions, you've checked your answers, you reviewed the questions, then go back to the passage and reread it and try to understand what's going on with it. And this is kind of coupled with the reading that you'll be doing longer term, where you want to start understanding how these texts work outside of just answering questions. So it's all based on the short term. It's all going to be based on reading specific stuff for the SAT, reading and practicing SAT or ACT passages, whatever it is you're working on. Okay. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, another question about score advice. Okay, hello, I'm a junior, and I recently got my SAT score for March 11th, 1320, 690 math, 630 reading. Want to get into the upper 1400, so that would be like a 150-point increase. What should be the game plan? When do you believe I should take the test? Okay, so the first thing is in terms of a study plan. Again, like I said before, I've got a study plan course that goes into some detail about how to set up a study plan, best practices, how long to study, how often to study, things like that. So that would be number one. Check that out. In terms of your specific situation, obviously the focus is going to be on the reading and writing. Now, this 630, it's hard to know whether, like, what the breakdown is there, reading, writing. Most likely you still have some points to gain in the writing, so I would really lean heavily on the writing section. Most students should be able to get that to a 35 plus, if not higher, because it's a very repetitive section. It tests the same things again and again. It's pretty simple. Timing isn't too bad. So that should be able to gain you maybe, I don't know what the breakdown is, but another, 30, 40, 50 points right there, something like that. So really lean on the writing section. For the math, what you're going to want to focus on, given where you're at, is hard questions. So these are the questions towards the end of the tests for both the multiple choice and the grid-ins. Those are probably where you're losing points. So when you're practicing, focus on hards especially. And then any topic that gives you trouble, which again, you're going to have to learn as you practice and work through this stuff. And then it comes down to reading, and hopefully you can gain, 30, 40 points in writing, 30, 40 points in math. That will take you to like 1,400. And then it's going to be about what to do with the reading, which I'm guessing is probably the lowest score of these set. Maybe it isn't, but probably is. And then a lot of it comes down to what we were just talking about, literally in the last question. So that would be the game plan. In terms of when you should take the test, it depends on your particular situation. If you're doing APs or whatever else you're doing, subject tests. Next one probably for you would be June, maybe my guess. And then either the August test, because they've released at least in the United States, I don't know if it's international. In the United States, there's an August test that you can take. If you're not in the United States, or if you want to take one not in August, then the October would be your main test then. So that would probably be the game plan for you at this point. Okay, so we're going to begin to wrap up. Let me just see if I can clean up any last questions. How much time should I read every day to improve in reading? From 540 to 700. Is New York Times or The Atlantic better for improving the reading section? So for specific advice on question types, I recommend, question types. My brain is fried. On things to read, go ahead and check out the reading list. Both The Atlantic and New York Times are there. New York Times is the standard. It's just, that's a great thing to just get in the habit of reading every day. But any newspaper, so Wall Street Journal would be fine, or any of the major newspapers, Washington Post, things like that are great. In terms of magazines, again, this is on the list, but The Atlantic is a good one. I have a mix of different genres and different political bents, political viewpoints, so it's a nice mix on the reading list, so I would check that out. In terms of how much to read, I can't tell you exactly how much you have to read to get from a 540 to 700. I can just say if you can read 20 to 30 minutes per day consistently, quality material, whether it's newspapers, magazines, books, whatever, that's going to make a big difference. Okay, last few questions. What can I do if I solved the published tests multiple times and after I review them I still get mistakes? Well, that's actually a good thing, because if you're still getting the same mistakes on tests you've already done, that's telling you something is something is awry there. What's going on there? That's really important data that you want to try to figure out what's going on. So it's hard to know exactly what to say without seeing which questions you're getting wrong, but that's actually really important. If you redo the tests and get things wrong still, something is really stuck there for you, and that's what you have to figure out, what's stuck and how you might work on it. So that's a really important piece of data. How do I study vocab for the new SAT? So I have a vocab list on my website. Go to reasonprep.com, search for the SAT vocab list, and there'll be a list and instructions on how best to use it. What about the September test? So the September test is only for ACT. There is no SAT in September. Let me just double check that, but I don't think there is. Just double checking. Yeah, no, so there's no SAT in September. There's one in August. Again, I believe it's only in the United States. Let's just double check that. Yeah, so in the United States, there is an August sitting. It's at the end of August, which is pretty sweet. And then there's an October. For international, there's just an October. For ACT, I believe there's a September test date. Let's just check, double check here. So for ACT, we have September 9th, and then in October. So pretty standard there as well. All right, how are we doing on time? Okay, we're almost set. Try to run through these last ones quickly. I've been scoring like 35 plus or minus 3 on the reading and writing sections. Can I raise it to near perfect in a couple weeks? Maybe, it's possible. Again, it's hard to say. Sure, it's possible, but without knowing which questions you're getting wrong, why you're getting them wrong, it's hard to say for sure. But certainly my answer to that question doesn't preclude you from trying either way. I mean, that's why, so this is one of the most common things I get, such and such, such and such, is it possible? Like, can this happen? Can this occur? Like, my answer is almost irrelevant. Like, I'll probably say, yeah, it's possible. But in the end, either way, you got to put in the time. Like, even if I said, no, you can't do that, it won't work. You're still going to probably try to prep anyway to get some improvement. So, like, my answer is not really helpful either way. So I would say, yes, it's possible, but you're going to have to put in the work either way. So put in the work. That's probably all I can say about it. That would be anything somewhat helpful. Okay, so we are out of time. We're going to wrap it up for today. I'm going to have another live stream session probably sometime next week, maybe Tuesday, maybe later. I have to look at my schedule. But it'll be posted on YouTube, so you'll get the time. It'll be in my Facebook group. You'll get an email about it if you're part of my emailing list about the live stream. The recording for the session will be up on YouTube shortly. I'll have an edited version of this sometime up probably maybe today, maybe Monday. I don't know. I have to see what the schedule looks like. So this recording will be up on YouTube. We'll have a live stream later in the week, all that good stuff. So keep sending your questions, and I look forward to seeing you all next time. So thanks for coming, and I'll talk to you all later.